The premise of attempting to build a business exclusively through artificial intelligence represents more than a curious experiment. It functions as an inquiry into the boundaries of automation, creativity, and trust in algorithmic intelligence. The essential question is not whether a machine can execute instructions, but whether it can architect a structure of value recognizable to human markets. The digital environment has gradually transformed entrepreneurship from a domain of material logistics into a landscape of abstract processes. Data replaces inventory, design replaces production, and the intelligence embedded within systems becomes a currency of its own. To instruct an artificial intelligence to start a business is to reframe the relationship between human intention and mechanical output. The machine does not possess ambition, yet it can simulate the mechanics of ambition when guided by prompts. What emerges is a dialogue of structured intelligence. Human curiosity establishes the goal. The algorithm constructs the scaffolding of execution. The interaction reveals that building a business no longer depends entirely on human experience, but rather on the translation of that experience into digital language. At the foundation of this process lies the notion of delegation, an ancient concept now translated into computational logic. Historically, delegation required trust in human agents. Now, it requires trust in statistical models. The human becomes an orchestrator rather than an executor, transferring labor to systems that calculate, analyze, and generate. Yet this delegation is not without philosophical tension. When responsibility is assigned to code, the human must confront questions of authorship. If the design, the branding, and even the marketing text are produced by artificial intelligence, who truly owns the business? The thinker or the tool? The first phase of such an experiment involves defining what constitutes a business in this digital paradigm. A business is no longer bound by geography, infrastructure, or physical assets. It can exist entirely as a sequence of automated outputs, ebooks synthesized by models, logos rendered by design algorithms, and scripts composed through natural language processing. The infrastructure becomes invisible, an ecosystem of APIs, cloud servers, and procedural generation that collectively emulate entrepreneurship. The next analytical layer concerns purpose. Why would someone attempt to start a business using only artificial intelligence? The answer rests in the dual pursuit of efficiency and discovery. Efficiency, because automation minimizes human time investment. Discovery, because the process itself reveals how machines reinterpret creativity. Artificial intelligence does not feel inspiration, yet it reconstructs patterns of human invention from the enormous lattice of learned examples. It understands form, not intention, composition, not conviction. Therefore, each product created through AI becomes a mirror of collective human behavior rather than individual genius. When evaluating the conceptual stages of such an enterprise, we can separate them into three intellectual movements: ideation, execution, and evaluation. In the ideation stage, the human establishes the conceptual nucleus. What type of business will emerge? This nucleus acts as an anchor for the AI's generative capacity. During execution, algorithms simulate operational functions: writing, design, marketing, distribution. And in the evaluation phase, the human analyzes the coherence, value, and viability of what has been produced. However, this process is not entirely neutral. Behind every AI-generated output lies a set of assumptions, patterns derived from training data that reflect both the diversity and the bias of human creativity. When artificial intelligence proposes an ebook outline, for instance, it reconstructs the statistical essence of thousands of successful works. When it designs a logo, it fuses aesthetic norms and market-tested geometry. Therefore, each generated artifact embodies both the potential and the limitation of algorithmic creativity. The machine innovates only within the boundaries of what it has learned. The implications for modern entrepreneurship are profound. As artificial intelligence accelerates production, it dissolves the traditional friction between concept and execution. The time once needed to develop prototypes or marketing materials collapses into minutes. This temporal compression transforms the role of the entrepreneur from producer to curator. Instead of crafting each component, the human now selects, refines, and contextualizes algorithmic outputs. This shift introduces a new hierarchy of value. Not the originality of creation, but the discernment in curation becomes the true competitive edge. Yet, this dependence on synthetic systems raises ethical considerations. What does it mean to monetize machine-generated work? Is the entrepreneur's profit justified when the majority of creative labor has been performed by an algorithm trained on collective human data? This moral ambiguity underscores a philosophical paradox. Automation empowers individuals while simultaneously decentralizing authorship. The identity of the creator becomes diffused among countless datasets, invisible engineers, and autonomous scripts. The experiment of building a business with only ChatGPT, therefore, serves as both a practical trial and a reflection on digital authorship. It examines not merely the feasibility of using AI as a tool, but the deeper significance of collaboration between consciousness and computation. The results of such a process reveal that success depends less on technical mastery and more on the quality of questions asked. Artificial intelligence does not create meaning, it responds to it. The clearer the human vision, the more coherent the algorithmic response. Through this lens, the idea of starting a business with only ChatGPT becomes symbolic of a new entrepreneurial epoch, one defined by linguistic engineering rather than manual labor. To command an AI is to shape potential realities through syntax. Every prompt is a blueprint, every output a provisional artifact. The challenge, then, is not to make the AI work, but to make it mean. Once the conceptual foundation of an AI-built business has been established, the second movement of the analysis turns toward process. How artificial intelligence operationalizes intention. In this stage, the human ceases to function as originator and becomes an interpreter of systems. Each decision, from naming the brand to choosing a product, evolves through conversation with the algorithm. The act of prompting replaces the act of designing, command replaces craft. Yet behind each command lies a hidden layer of translation, the transmutation of human intention into computational syntax. The human language becomes the new architecture of creation. Every phrase issued to the AI contains both ambiguity and potential. To request design a logo for an eco-friendly company, for example, is not to describe a specific image but to construct a field of possibilities that the machine must statistically resolve. The AI responds not with comprehension but with probability, approximating meaning through learned association. What emerges is not the product of understanding, but the product of pattern recognition at massive scale. This exchange highlights the linguistic nature of entrepreneurship in the digital era. Where industrial production once relied on material manipulation, algorithmic creation relies on the manipulation of meaning. The prompt becomes a form of code, and the entrepreneur becomes a semiotic engineer. Success depends on precision of articulation rather than technical proficiency. The more clearly the user defines parameters, tone, and purpose, the more coherent the AI's generative process becomes. To understand this mechanism is to understand the infrastructure of collaboration between human and machine. Artificial intelligence functions as a recursive mirror. It reflects linguistic intent, amplifies it, and returns it transformed. The human then selects, edits, and recontextualizes. The process is cyclical: propose, generate, refine, and reintegrate. This rhythm creates an emergent form of co-authorship in which originality arises not from invention but from iteration. Within this iterative model, feedback becomes the nucleus of control. Each output is an experiment, and each revision an interpretation of the system's response. This recursive interaction resembles scientific methodology more than artistic inspiration. The entrepreneur becomes both researcher and curator, treating every generation as a data point. The distinction between creativity and analysis begins to blur. Ideation becomes measurable. Artificial intelligence transforms creative uncertainty into reproducible process. However, this mechanization of creation introduces a paradox. The faster ideas can be generated, the less time exists for reflection. When content is produced in seconds, the human must consciously impose slowness to recover meaning. This tension between speed and depth defines the modern creative economy. The machine accelerates execution, but the human must decelerate understanding. Without reflection, output becomes noise. With reflection, it becomes knowledge. From an operational standpoint, the AI-driven business experiment can be decomposed into several procedural steps: defining purpose, generating assets, testing market response, and adjusting strategy. Each phase unfolds in a purely digital environment, executed through text commands and algorithmic synthesis. The human orchestrator oversees flow rather than production, monitoring coherence and alignment with the initial vision. For instance, consider the act of generating an ebook. The AI can propose topics, structure chapters, and compose text within minutes. The result is both astonishing and unsettling. A complete product appearing without traditional labor. Yet this immediacy exposes the absence of human struggle that traditionally underpins authorship. The product exists, but its narrative of creation has vanished. The philosophical question resurfaces: does creation without effort still carry meaning? A similar dynamic appears in logo generation. The AI synthesizes geometric compositions, color palettes, and stylistic motifs based on abstract instructions. It recombines thousands of prior designs to produce something statistically novel yet aesthetically familiar. This echoes the concept of computational mimicry, innovation through recombination rather than pure invention. The visual output appears original, but its DNA belongs to the collective archive of design history. The entrepreneur's role, therefore, becomes one of discernment, recognizing which combination aligns with emotional and strategic intent. At this juncture, it becomes clear that building a business with only ChatGPT is less about constructing a company and more about constructing a methodology, a way of thinking through technology. The entrepreneur learns to ask sharper questions, to contextualize results, and to recognize the difference between novelty and value. Artificial intelligence provides unlimited quantity. The human provides qualitative judgment. The implications extend beyond individual enterprise. If every person can instruct an AI to generate products, designs, and strategies, the nature of competition shifts from production to interpretation. The market becomes saturated not with work, but with versions of work. In this environment, authenticity emerges as a new form of scarcity. The entrepreneur who maintains conceptual integrity amidst infinite automation becomes the new artisan. Not through manual skill, but through intellectual clarity. Finally, we encounter the philosophical dimension of autonomy. When AI performs nearly every operational function, the human must redefine their place in the chain of creation. The machine executes, but it cannot desire. It cannot assign meaning to its own actions. The human remains the only entity capable of infusing purpose into process. Thus, the AI-built business reveals a hierarchy not of intelligence, but of intention. It is the human sense of why that animates the machine's ability to perform how. Through this lens, automation becomes not a replacement for human creativity, but its reflection, an extension of will through computation. The entrepreneur who understands this dynamic does not fear automation, but wields it consciously, using each prompt as an act of design thinking. The result is not merely a digital business, but a new cognitive art form. Entrepreneurship as dialogue with intelligence itself. The final analytical movement turns toward evaluation and consequence. What it means for both creator and society when a business can be conceived, executed, and maintained through artificial intelligence alone. What began as a technical exercise transforms into a philosophical mirror reflecting the evolution of human agency in a synthetic era. The experiment does not merely test productivity, it interrogates identity. Once the systems have produced their ebooks, logos, marketing texts, and strategies, the essential question arises: what has truly been created? The visible result is a functional brand, potentially market-ready, but the invisible outcome is a shift in authorship. The human, once the craftsman, becomes the conductor of invisible labor. Artificial intelligence becomes an intermediary layer between thought and realization, a bridge that both connects and distances its creator from creation. This phenomenon introduces the concept of distance in authorship. Historically, craftsmanship implied proximity between creator and object. The painter touched the canvas, the writer shaped each sentence, the entrepreneur negotiated each deal. In the AI-built business, distance replaces touch. The human no longer constructs the product, but rather orchestrates the process of its construction. This distance, while efficient, also dilutes the emotional residue of making. What is gained in speed is often lost in intimacy. The digital entrepreneur must therefore cultivate new forms of emotional intelligence, an ability to find meaning in orchestration rather than manual creation. This reorientation challenges deeply rooted cultural values that associate creativity with personal labor. The new creative act becomes decision-making itself. To choose between algorithmic outputs, to interpret data patterns, to edit what machines propose, these acts redefine authorship for the 21st century. When viewed economically, the implications expand further. As artificial intelligence systems replicate creative labor, the marginal cost of production approaches zero. Ebooks, marketing visuals, brand names, all can be generated almost instantaneously. The barrier to entry collapses, and competition multiplies exponentially. This democratization of creation simultaneously empowers individuals and saturates the marketplace. Value migrates from scarcity of production to scarcity of perspective. In other words, what becomes valuable is not what one makes, but how one frames what is made. This transition demands a redefinition of entrepreneurial skill. Analytical discernment replaces operational expertise. The ability to evaluate coherence, emotion, and strategic fit becomes the new form of craftsmanship. The entrepreneur who masters contextual intelligence, the sensitivity to what fits within cultural, ethical, and aesthetic ecosystems, becomes the modern artisan. Artificial intelligence may generate infinite outcomes, but only the human can decide which outcome matters. From a socio-technical perspective, this evolution mirrors a broader shift in civilization. From physical labor to symbolic labor. The economy is no longer primarily concerned with producing objects, but with producing meanings. Artificial intelligence accelerates this evolution by transforming language itself into an industrial tool. A prompt becomes a production order, syntax becomes machinery. Through this transformation, words acquire material consequence. The keyboard replaces the factory floor. Yet this immense capacity also demands responsibility. Each AI-generated output carries embedded biases inherited from its training data. Every automated business risks reproducing cultural patterns unconsciously. The digital entrepreneur must therefore act as an ethical curator, filtering not only for profitability, but for integrity. The question is no longer, can AI build it, but should AI build it this way? Responsibility migrates from action to selection. There also exists an emotional paradox at the heart of automation: empowerment through detachment. The entrepreneur experiences creative expansion, the ability to manifest ideas rapidly, yet simultaneously faces existential compression. When the machine can replicate one's process, what remains uniquely human? This is where philosophy enters the conversation. Meaning arises not from output, but from awareness. The conscious act of reflecting on creation transforms mechanical production into human art. Thus, the true outcome of the experiment, starting a business with only ChatGPT, is not merely the establishment of a digital enterprise, but the revelation of a new ontological relationship between human and machine. The AI becomes a mirror of cognition, a partner that materializes thought. Its brilliance lies not in independence but in resonance. The human provides direction. The machine provides manifestation. Together, they construct not only products but paradigms. The long-term consequence of this dynamic extends beyond economics into epistemology, the study of knowledge itself. Artificial intelligence forces humanity to reconsider the origin of ideas. If creativity can be statistically modeled, then perhaps creativity is not an isolated gift, but an emergent pattern of combination and context. This realization humbles the myth of genius and elevates the collective intelligence embedded in data. Yet it also reminds us that pattern alone cannot generate purpose. Purpose remains human. In the final analysis, to start a business with only ChatGPT is to test the elasticity of human imagination. It reveals that tools do not replace thinkers, they expand them. It exposes the fragility of meaning when automation becomes absolute, but also its resilience when guided by conscious intention. The machine may write, design, and market, but it cannot care. The act of caring, of assigning emotional weight to creation, remains the final frontier of humanity within automation. Therefore, the experiment concludes not with the birth of a business, but with a realization. The future of entrepreneurship will not belong to those who resist machines, nor to those who surrender to them, but to those who learn to think with them,